I saved for 40 years. 2 bad years almost took all of it. That man did everything right. He worked, he saved, he waited, and he still came within one bad decision of losing the whole thing. Here's what nobody warns you about until you're already living it. A 30% loss at 40 is an inconvenience. The same loss the year you retire can be permanent, because the one thing that always rescued you was time, and time just ran out. You think the danger in retirement is not saving enough. Warren Buffett spent 60 years warning about the exact opposite. The thing that ends retirements isn't failing to get rich. It's losing what you already have, quietly in 5 ways you won't see coming. He never wrote them as a list, but if you listen to everything he said, the warnings are unmistakable. 5 of them. And if you're between 50 and 70, every one of them is aimed directly at you, right now. I'll walk you through each, in his own words, with the single move that shuts it down. Save the fifth for last. It's the one almost everybody ignores, and it's the one that quietly does the most damage. Because here's what Buffett was really saying underneath all of it. The tide is going out, and the tide always goes out. Buffett's most famous rule sounds too simple to matter. Rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. People roll their eyes at that. Obviously, nobody wants to lose money, but that's not the warning. The warning is in the math of a whole. Lose 50%, and getting 50% back doesn't make you whole. You need 100% just to break even. Every loss digs a hole deeper than the drop that made it. Now add the one fact that changes everything after you retire. You're not adding money anymore. You're pulling it out. Meet David. 62, 1 month retired, still invested the same aggressive way that grew his money for 30 years. Year 1, the market falls 28%. He tells himself what always worked before. Stay the course, it comes back. But watch what's different now. He still has to eat, so he sells to cover the year. He's selling at the bottom. He's turning a loss on paper into a loss that's real, using the exact shares he needed to last him 20 more years. The market recovers. David's money doesn't. On a $500,000 nest egg, that first-year timing didn't cost him a bad year. It quietly erased more than $100,000 he was never able to earn back. Researchers have a cold name for this: sequence of returns risk. A bad year at the start of retirement does damage that a bad year in your 40s simply can't. You're probably thinking the answer is to play it safe with everything. It isn't. Buffett never said hide under the mattress. He said protect the downside, so one bad year can never force your hand. That's the move. Keep 2 to 3 years of spending in something boring and stable. So when the tide drops, you are never selling your future to pay for this week's groceries. David didn't have that cushion. His neighbor Susan did. Same crash, same week. She spent from her safe money and left the rest untouched. One of them recovered, you already know which. And that cushion, the thing that saved Susan, is exactly what the next warning is designed to drain. One invisible dollar at a time. In 2007, Buffett bet $1 million on something almost no one believed. That one simple, cheap index fund would beat a room full of elite hedge fund managers over 10 years. They took the bet. In 2017, he won. It wasn't close. His point wasn't that the pros are stupid. It's that their fee is a tax you pay whether they win or lose. Costs really matter, he said. And in retirement, they matter more than anyone selling them will ever admit. Here's why a number this small is this dangerous. 1% a year feels like nothing. It never arrives as a bill you notice. It just quietly leaves. So let's drag it into the light. Watch it dissolve. You retire with $500,000 and you pay 1% to have it managed. Year 1, that's $5,000. Fine, you think. That's reasonable. Now run it across a 30-year retirement, compounding the entire way. That quiet 1% doesn't take $30,000 from you. It takes more than a quarter of everything you had. Put that in a form you can feel. That's a paid-off car. 2 years of the travel you promised yourself. A room in your own house? Gone. And you never once saw it leave. You might be thinking your advisor earns every penny. Maybe yours does. Buffett's warning is simpler than that. Never mistake a confident bill for a good deal. Ask what you pay, in real dollars, out loud. If nobody will give you a straight number, that silence is your number. The move: audit every fee you pay this year and default to low-cost index funds unless someone can prove, in dollars, not adjectives, they're worth more than they take. David never asked once. Susan asked every single year. This thief only robs the people who refuse to look, which brings us to the strangest loss of all. Money that vanishes while it's sitting in the one place you were sure was safe. A scare hits. And almost every retiree does the exact same thing. They run to cash. It feels like safety. It feels like finally being in control. Buffett's warning here is blunt. Cash, he once warned, is a terrible long-term asset, one that pays virtually nothing and is certain to depreciate in value. Certain, not likely. Certain. Here's the trap. Cash can't crash, so it feels safe. But it doesn't have to crash to rob you. It just has to sit still while everything you buy gets more expensive. Watch what that does over a long retirement. At 3% inflation, prices double in about 24 years, which means the safe dollar you're guarding today buys half as much by the time you're old enough to truly need it. Your bank balance never drops. Your grocery cart quietly tells the truth. David felt clever. After the crash, he moved almost everything to cash and told himself he was finally safe. He never lost a dollar. He just slowly lost what every dollar could do until half his safety had melted while he watched. You're probably thinking you need cash to sleep at night. You do on some. This isn't zero cash, and it isn't all cash. The trap is mistaking the feeling of safety for the fact of it. The move: hold enough cash for your buckets and emergencies, and keep the rest working against inflation instead of surrendering to it. Susan kept 2 years in cash and stopped there. Enough to stay calm. Never so much that inflation could pick her pocket for the next 20 years. But the most expensive losses in retirement don't come from the market, or the fees, or inflation. They come from the one person you'd never suspect. This is the warning Buffett repeated more than any other, because it's the one every single person is certain doesn't apply to them. Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. Read that again. It's describing exactly what your gut will beg you to do wrong. When everyone's terrified and prices are low, your gut screams sell. When everyone's celebrating and prices are high, your gut screams buy more. Your instincts are almost exactly backwards, and retirement cranks the volume to the top. Now it isn't a number on a screen. It's your survival. Fear hits twice as hard when there's no paycheck coming to bail you out. David lived it. The market fell, the headlines screamed, and he did the most human thing there is. He sold at the bottom to make the fear stop. He locked the loss in forever. Then he sat in cash, waiting to feel safe again, and climbed back in near the top, right before the next drop. He didn't get unlucky, he got human. The most important quality for an investor, Buffett said, is temperament, not intellect. You might be thinking you'd never panic like that. Almost no one thinks they would. Almost everyone does the day it's finally their money on the line. The move: take the decision out of your own hands before the fear ever arrives. A written plan. Automatic rebalancing. Rules you set on a calm day so the frightened version of you isn't allowed to override them. Susan didn't make a single move during the crash. Not because she was braver, because she'd already decided in advance that she wouldn't. Her plan protected her from herself. And that leads straight into the trap built specifically for the most careful retirees of all. The ones who were only ever trying to be responsible. Risk, Buffett said, comes from not knowing what you're doing. Not from the market, not from volatility, from complexity you were talked into and never really understood. Retirement turns you into the perfect target for it. You've got a lifetime of savings, a deep fear of losing it, and a phone that rings with polished strangers offering to protect it, using products built to sound safe and priced to make the seller rich. David got the call. A complicated high-commission product with a soothing name, promising him the market's gains with none of its risk. He didn't understand how it actually worked. He signed anyway, because the man in the good suit clearly did. Years later, he read the fine print he'd skipped, the caps on his gains, the penalty for touching his own money early, the fees folded quietly inside other fees, The protection had eaten most of the growth he was promised, and it was all perfectly legal. Here's the tell Buffett handed you for free. If you can't explain how something makes you money in one plain sentence, you don't own an investment. You own someone else's paycheck. You may be thinking these things must be regulated, so how bad can they really be? Legal and good for you are not the same sentence. Plenty of things that are perfectly legal are perfectly ruinous. For you, the move. If you can't explain it simply, you don't buy it. Buffett built a fortune by refusing to step outside what he understood. You can protect one the very same way. Susan turned down every pitch she couldn't explain to her own grandchild. Boring, simple, still standing, which leaves the warning underneath all the others. The quietest one, the most expensive one, the one almost nobody sees until it's already too late. Every warning so far was about a wrong move. This last one is the opposite. It's about the wrong stillness. The single biggest risk in retirement isn't a crash, or a fee, or a bad product. It's freezing, doing nothing, leaving the whole thing on autopilot because sitting down to face it feels like too much. Remember the man from the very start? I saved for 40 years. 2 bad years almost took all of it. 2 bad years didn't do that alone. Doing nothing about them did. He kept the aggressive mix and never adjusted it. He paid the fees and never questioned them. He felt the fear and never planned for it. Not one disaster. 100 small silences stacked on top of each other. And underneath all of it, the quietest loss of all, outliving your money. You spent your whole life hoping for one thing, a long life. It is the exact thing an untended plan cannot survive. Now here's the reframe that ties every warning into one. Buffett was never really teaching you how to get rich. Read the 5 back. Protect the downside. Cut the costs. Beat inflation. Master yourself. Stay simple. Every single one is the same instruction wearing a different coat. Do not lose what you already have. And he proved he meant it in the most personal way a man can. In his own will, the instructions for the money he's leaving his wife are almost shockingly plain. 90% in a low-cost S&P 500 index fund, 10% in short-term government bonds. That's the entire plan. The richest investor who ever lived, and the prescription for the person he loves most fits on an index card. That is the whole secret. Not more, not cleverer, safer, cheaper, calmer, and actually done. Here's the one move that quietly diffuses all 5 at once. This week, not someday, pull up your plan and look. The mix, the fees, the cash, the panic button, the one thing in there you can't explain. One honest hour at the kitchen table is the entire difference between David and Susan, because the tide is always going out. On every retirement, sooner or later, it does. Buffett never had a crystal ball. He just made very sure that when the water pulled back, he still had something on. Do that this week, and when your tide goes out, you'll still be standing. I'll see you in the next one.